Get ready, Staten Island.
The Ferry Hawks host the Hagerstown Flying Boxcars. Tonight at 7 p.m., it's soccer night, and kids glow around the bases postgame. Saturday at 6:30, it's Broadway night with postgame fireworks and Broadway rave. Sunday at 1:30, it's Military Appreciation Day, and the kids run around the bases.
A great day out for the entire family. Kids run the bases after every Sunday home game. Want the best seats all season? Get more Ferry Hawks for only $63. Visit ferryhawks.com now to lock in your seats.
Listen, all you New Yorkers. Taxi.
Okay, man, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC minicast.
Our good friends at Cygnal Polling have been back in the field, getting the latest on where things stand as we head into these critical midterms. John Rogers at Cygnal Polling joins us. John, good Sunday morning. Thanks for being with us.
Sean, great to be with you as always.
All right. I always wonder when I talk to you guys if you're going to say everything's shifted, it's all great. But give me a sense of where we all talk about the generic ballot, a generic Republican versus a generic Democrat that gives us the lay of the land. Where does the generic ballot stand now, and how has it changed? Last month, the last couple months, which direction is it headed in?
Yeah, so the generic ballot is just like, when we ask people, if the election were held today, would you tend to vote for the Democratic candidate or Republican candidate for Congress? And it's the most basic fundamental question that you can ask in polling. And it's also incredibly predictive of where the environment is and where it's, potentially headed, right? And so the generic ballot right now is at D+5. So 49% of the electorate say that they plan to vote for the Democratic candidate for Congress. 44% say they plan to vote for the Republican candidate for Congress. And that's actually a shift in favor of Republicans month over month. So back in May, it was a D+7 generic ballot. And so it's actually shifted a little bit towards Republicans, going from D+7 to D+5 from May to June.
Okay. And what about in the past? So is this just since May? Is this what's the trend if you look back a couple months? Is it moving in our direction? Is that a blip?
Yeah, so if you look back to June of last year, right, you rewind the tape to a year ago, it was deadlocked, right? It was in June of last year, it was D47, Republican 47. And so looking back from June of 2025 till now, the environment has kind of slipped away from Republicans from June until now, and it's sort of been a slow slippage away from Republicans. There's a lot of different things that I think account for that. The higher gas prices that people have seen since the start of this calendar year certainly has had an impact. And I know we'll get to this in just a little bit later, Sean, but Republicans are starting to also lose the trust that voters had traditionally had with the GOP on inflation and on the economy and jobs. And so all of that has kind of added up to where it's an environment that favors Democrats more than Republicans right now. But it seems like what was a pretty significant advantage for Democrats the last couple of months, that it has started to kind of freeze or even come back to the Republicans from April and May until now.
One of the things that I think a lot of people look at who look at these polls is, are Republicans with Republicans? Trump always talks about how much the party is with him, and are Democrats with Democrats? So are people suiting up in their uniform? What does that look like?
It's a great question. And so generally what you have here is both of the bases are pretty locked in, and you have about 10% of the electorate that are kind of in the middle. And you can look at that 10% of the electorate, and there's two ways to kind of look at it. 6% of the electorate are true swing voters, and so they're truly competitive. They're economically strained. They tend to trust Republicans more on crime, more on immigration, but they are leaning a little bit more towards trusting Democrats on the economy and jobs. So that's 6% of the electorate. And then the other 4% that make up the 10% in the middle, we're calling kind of the soft opposition to Republicans, right? So they tend to be lean a little bit more towards Democrats on the ballot, but they're skeptical of both parties, right? And so this is what I would say is this is a type of voter that Susan Collins can win and has historically won in Maine, for instance, right? They tend to be kind of in the center or maybe a little bit leaning toward the center left, but depending on the Republican candidate, they're going to be open to voting for the right type of Republican candidate. And if you look at Maine, for instance, that's a voter that Susan Collins has historically won.
So if you think about this, I mean, again, this is we'll have to understand, I think, and tell me if John Rogers, if I'm wrong in this assessment, but I feel like, generally speaking, I look at the numbers that I'm seeing in the Cygnal polling. 94% of Republicans are happy with where Republicans are, and 80. What is it? I'm just looking here. And Democrats are in a pretty close situation. Where basically these 6% though make the difference. This is where you win a close election, like in Maine, right? This is where winning that 6% is really what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's right. And so when you look at swing voters, that group in the middle, they're going to decide a lot of the battleground districts, whether you're thinking about in Maine or Ohio or Texas, kind of these North Carolina, these battleground states, they're very much focused on inflation and the economy. So 34% of them say that inflation and the economy is the top priority, the most important issue that they have. Another 14% say government spending and waste, right? And so nearly half of swing voters are saying something related to the economy. And I think that's where Republicans have historically held an edge with the electorate on economy and jobs and on inflation. It shifted a little bit away from the GOP the last couple of months, but I think that's recoverable, right? But it is something that Republican campaigns are going to have to repair in June and July and as leading into the fall.
So 2 questions that I think are important are, do Republicans have a motivation problem with their base? In other words, when we talk about, again, I'm looking at the numbers here. It says the partisan lock, and this is in your deck, which is at Cygnal. The partisan lock is near total. Republicans back their candidates 94-4. Does that mean they're fired up though? Because I think when I talked to your colleague Brent Buchanan, part of the problem is that they're hardcore Republicans, the guys that you need to go out and cast a ballot in a midterm election, aren't as excited. Is that fair, or can we count on those? In other words, what I'm trying to get at, John Rogers, is the following. I think sometimes Republicans talk to themselves too much. They talk to people. It's like trying to sell something to someone who's already bought it. It's like, dude, you're good. So do we need to sell more to our own side, or do we need to be reaching out to those swing voters more?
It's a little bit of both, right? And so there are a lot of different data points that you can look at, both in terms of primaries that have already happened. And so, for instance, in North Carolina, the primary, there were 200,000 more people roughly who voted in the Democrat primary in North Carolina than Republicans who voted in the Republican primary in North Carolina. And so you have those data points, Sean, that you can look at where it says that when you look at the primary participation, and your mileage may vary on these, right? Because some states, there's a very pitched Democrat primary on one side, and maybe it's not on the Republican side. But North Carolina was a pretty good, primaries to look at for comparison. So you have those data points that you can look at. And then in our poll, in our national poll that we just came out with, you have a gap of 13 points between strongly Democratic voters and strongly Republican voters. They're saying that they're extremely motivated, right? So 69% of the GOP base say they're extremely motivated to vote in the November midterm election, compared to 82% of the Democratic base who say that they're extremely motivated to vote in the November midterm election. So it's a little bit of both. Republicans need to make sure that they message, especially to non-college voters. There's been some slippage there around the economy, and they need to make sure that they talk to those non-college voters and say, look, this is what's on the ballot, and draw a strong contrast with the Democrats too, and say, I know that things may be a little bit tough right now. I hear your pain kind of in Bill Clinton-esque terms, but this is what's going to happen if Democrats take control of the House. And this is what's going to happen if this particular Democrat is elected. And then they also though have to make a second complementary pitch to those swing voters and talk about affordability and talk about the kitchen table issues and the pocketbook issues that they care about.
It's interesting you brought that up. I've had members of Congress on my show weekly, and I'll ask a lot of them, give me your elevator speech. Give me the 60-second pitch why Republicans should maintain the majority. And I've got to tell you, John Rogers, most of them don't do well. And I think there's three messages that I think I'm intrigued to get your take on. One is what you said. Here's what Democrats will do, the warning, if you will, right? You got to understand these are bad people. This is what they will do. They will make your life more expensive. They will make us less safe, et cetera, et cetera. All they want to do is impeach Trump. Then there's the sort of like what I've done. Hey, we passed all this good stuff. No tax on tips, no tax on security. But then the most important, I think, is I always think that like what we forget is people are basically, you're asking to be hired again. What are you going to do for me in the future? And that's where I think Republicans are coming up short. They're not talking about what else I'll do for you. It's like, I did all this and they suck, and that's it.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think that contrast with Democrats is also going to be really important. One of the things, Sean, that we found in the national poll that we just conducted was, so when you look at the president's net image, right, it's not great. Like the media has covered that a good bit. His net image is at -13. But when you compare his net image with different voter groups vis-a-vis the generic ballot, there are a lot of different voter groups out there who are open to voting for a Republican, even if they don't love the president, right? So you look at independent women. Republicans do 24 points better with independent women on the generic ballot than their view of the president would suggest, right? And so I think part of what Republicans have to understand is you can't get sucked into this like debate over the latest thing that maybe the president has posted on Truth Social. You just have to very forthrightly say, this is what we've done. This is what we're going to do on the economy and on jobs. And oh, by the way, we fixed this, this, and this on crime and immigration. And this is what the Democrat is going to do if they get in power. And I think Maine is a great state for kind of thinking about this, is that Susan Collins just has to say, this is what I've done. This is what I'm going to do. And this is what, the Democrat nominee, this is what he has said and done in his personal life. And then this is also the chaos that is going to be unleashed if his policies were put forward at a national level.
The thing that's so interesting to me is that Republicans actually have a really good list of accomplishments. Some of it Trump did on his own, right? But I mean, my point is that you've cut taxes, you've secured the border, and there are things that upset me, like these Trump accounts, that I don't think we're talking about enough. I think that, like, when you talk about the next generation of Americans, and so many parents are worried about how their kids are going to do, the Trump account to me are amazing. And then you've got what the president has done on Trump RX to cut the price of prescription drugs and make so many critical drugs more affordable. I don't get the sense that Republicans are doing. I've heard, like, I'll give you my example, John Rogers. If you guys went out and polled Trump accounts, I bet you people would say, I don't even know what you're talking about. Because I've only heard Scott Bessent talk about them twice, one at the rollout event and then once at the White House briefing that he held. And so tell me if I'm wrong. I feel like some of this is the tools are in the tool bag. They just haven't even looked in the bag yet.
Right. And I think that's why you start to see, so we ask a battery of which party do you trust more on key issues, right? So economy and jobs, cost of living, immigration, crime, cutting wasteful spending, and foreign affairs, those 6 issues, right? And so for the first time that we've really found, Democrats are now more trusted than Republicans on economy and jobs. So
wow.
The electorate as a total, it's a D+2 advantage on trust towards Democrats on the economy and jobs.
Have you ever seen that before? I've never heard Democrats leading on the economy and jobs. I mean, to be honest with you, that scares me that anyone thinks they're a Democrat, considering if you hear of a Democrat right now, you're hearing about like Mondami and Sanders and AOC doing crazy, wacko socialist stuff. I guess from a polling standpoint, didn't that jump out at you guys as like, well, we have a problem, Houston?
Yeah, for sure. And it's more on cost of living than it is on jobs, especially when you look at swing voters, right? So when you look, Sean, at Trusted Party on economy and jobs, Republicans among swing voters still have an R+5 advantage on which party is going to do a better job on the economy and creating jobs, right? But when you look at cost of living, the R+5 advantage becomes a D+6 deficit, right, among swing voters. And so swing voters trust Democrats more, D+4, 36 to 32, right? And so economy and jobs, I think that there's sort of an environmental advantage that Republicans have on that will kind of come back our way a little bit. But I think the cost of living and inflation is the tougher nut to crack. Part of it's because of the gasoline prices. And then also I think because of some of the things you said, where there's been some things that the administration has done directly and then also in working with Congress. But I just think that it's kind of gotten lost a little bit in the froth of a midterm election year thus far.
Is there any erosion in key groups, women, Hispanics, blacks, anything that we had done well with in the 24 election that we've seen discernible erosion with?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so let me rewind the clock a year back, right, to kind of give some perspective here. So if you went back and looked at our June of 2025 poll, Hispanics were D+9 in a year ago. They're now D+18, right? So we have a 9-point loss or erosion year over year with Hispanic voters. Now, some of this was, we did much better with Hispanics in 2020 and then especially 2024 than we had done in previous presidential cycles. And then especially if you looked at the Rio Grande Valley and Starr County and some of those counties in South Texas, there were just massive shifts, especially from 2016 all the way through 2024 towards Trump and the Republican Party. But, we, and I think you and a lot of other people, well, actually not a lot of other people, I think it was kind of a minority of Republican folks kind of warned that those people, some of those Hispanic voters were not necessarily committed Republicans.
No.
It was just that they preferred Trump over Kamala Harris and Trump over Joe Biden in 2020 and 2024. And so Hispanics have shifted away from us by 9 points on the generic ballot. Non-college voters have also shifted away from us. With non-college women, they've gone from D+2 to D+8, so 6-point drop from a year ago. And then non-college men, we're still doing really well with non-college men. That's kind of the base of the party in a lot of ways. But they've gone from R+24 to R+17, so a 7-point drop. And a lot of that is driven by this loss of trust in the Republican Party's addressing of inflation in the economy. So, with non-college women, they have dropped by 19 points. If you go back to looking at September, they have dropped by 19 points in their trust of the Republican Party on cost of living. Non-college men have dropped by 12 points, and the Hispanics have dropped by 13 points on cost of living, right? So that really is kind of the main driver of when you see deterioration for Republicans in the generic ballot. A lot of it is traced back to this cost of living and inflation issue.
All right, well then let's get to the final issue that I want to address with you today. The Iran war and the gas price drag. Like how important is this to the prospects of Republicans this November?
Yeah, so we asked a question on this where we kind of framed up and we said the United States and Iran have agreed to a 60-day deal to pause the war and reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Do you support or oppose President Trump finalizing a deal to pause and eventually end the war with Iran, right? And there was really strong support kind of across the board. 74% of the electorate said that they supported the President Trump finalizing the deal and eventually ending the war with Iran, right? But what was really interesting was when you asked, we delved a little bit deeper into it, and we said since the war has begun, gas prices have risen, and then we asked people, do they feel like that the higher gas prices are the short-term cost of a necessary military operation? Do they think the war may be justified, but the administration should do more to lower energy costs? Or do they think that the economic impact of the war on families is just too high to justify it? And there's a majority of voters overall, and then also a majority of swing voters who say So you have half of voters who say that the economic impact of the war is too high to justify it. And then you have an additional 16% who say that the war may be justified, but the administration should do more to lower costs. And so you've got about 2/3 of that's where the electorate is. They're saying either the war just isn't enough to justify this, or that we've got to do more to lower energy costs, right? And then another way that we kind of try to frame this up was we said, we kind of asked the generic ballot again, but with this caveat, we said, if the war with Iran is still ongoing and gas prices remain elevated in November, how would you vote in the election for Congress? And that D+5 generic ballot goes to a D+7 generic ballot, right? So if we're still engaged in Iran and if gas prices remain elevated, it's going to be something that will hurt us. And there's a couple of groups that it will hurt in particular with. But so it is something that people are concerned about. I know members of Congress and have their positions on it kind of staked out, but it is something that is affecting the electorate.
Okay. John Rogers, where can they go to find all of this polling that you guys do at Cygnal?
Go to cygn.al, and then you can also follow me on X or Twitter, John Rogers with Cygnal, and you should be able to get everything you need there.
Awesome. I appreciate it. We'll check back in with you when you've got some more information. I always appreciate you sharing it with here. Guys, stick around. Some interesting week for the media. We'll break it all down. Plus, President Trump wants another reconciliation bill. You're listening to Full Court Press. I'm your host, Sean Spicer, here on WABC. We'll be right back.
This is Full Court Press with Sean Spicer on 77 WABC.